He didn't just step into the ring to fight. He stepped into the ring to change the world. Muhammad Ali has always been remembered as the greatest boxer of all time. But his true struggle wasn't limited to the ring ropes. While the spotlight focused on his speed, technique, and unforgettable taunts, Ali recognized a weapon even more powerful than his fists: his voice. He knew the attention he received could be transformed into something greater, something beyond sporting glory. The young Cassius Clay, who became Muhammad Ali after converting to Islam, quickly realized that winning fights wasn't enough. He had to win causes. His trajectory coincided with one of the most turbulent periods in American history: the struggle for civil rights, the Vietnam War, and the stifled cry of millions wanting to be heard. Ali wasn't just an athlete, he was a symbol. His every word carried the weight of a punch. He wouldn't remain silent in the face of injustice, even when it cost him titles, fortune, or freedom. "Why would I fight against people who never called me the enemy?" he asked, refusing to serve in Vietnam. This attitude turned him into a villain for some and a hero for others. His fame, earned through charisma and courage, became both a shield and a sword, a way to denounce the racism, inequality, and violence that marked his era. With every interview, with every challenging statement, Ali built more than a career. He championed a cause. The man who claimed to be the greatest didn't just talk about boxing. He spoke about the daily struggles of millions of invisible people. His boldness, his authenticity, and his ability to laugh in the face of danger transformed him into an icon that transcended borders. And the more they tried to silence him, the more his voice echoed. This is the story of how Muhammad Ali used fame and charisma to fight not only for himself, but for all those who had no space to shout. The year was 1960. A lanky young man, just 18 years old, stepped into the ring in Rome to compete for an Olympic medal. Cassius Clay wasn't yet Muhammad Ali, but he already carried within him something that couldn't be hidden: an almost supernatural confidence. His eyes shone, his mouth fired off quick, sharp sentences, full of humor and defiance. But behind this exuberant image lay the silent memory of a boy who had grown up in Louisville, Kentucky, in a world divided by skin color. There, he knew not only the sound of applause, but also the weight of the gazers that judged him before he even opened his mouth. From an early age, he felt the invisible barrier that separated his community from the rest of the city. He couldn't go to certain places, couldn't sit in any seat, wasn't treated as an equal. To many, he was just another black boy in an America that insisted on denying him space. But he decided that if he couldn't be heard as a citizen, he would be heard as a champion. In the ring, his movements were poetry. He dodged as if dancing, struck as if telling a story. Each punch was a declaration, each victory a message. He was not invisible. When he won Olympic gold, he stood before the world as a symbol of pride. But upon returning home, the medal failed to open doors that prejudice had closed. Glory did not erase injustice. On a silent night, after being refused service at a restaurant because of his race, Cassius threw the medal into the Ohio River. This gesture was not just revolt, it was a symbolic act, a way of saying that winning fights wasn't enough if life outside the ring still treated him like a loser. From then on, his fame took on a new purpose. Cassius began using the microphone as skillfully as he used his fists. In interviews, he turned common questions into spectacles, taunted rivals, rhymed quick verses, and made everyone laugh. But amidst the banter, he hid profound truths. "I'm not just the greatest boxer, I'm the greatest, period." These words, too many, sounded like arrogance, but to his community, they were liberating. He spoke with a pride millions could never feel out loud. In his neighborhood, children began to imitate him. Young people repeated his phrases like mantras. There, he transformed self-esteem into a weapon, charisma into a shield. His loud laughter, his irreverence, his audacity in front of white journalists were a calculated provocation. He showed he was fearless, that he wouldn't accept the position they wanted to impose on him. And so, slowly, he ceased to be just an athlete. He became a spokesperson for a generation that no longer wanted to be silenced. His fights inside the ring were watched by millions, but it was his words outside it that began to echo like thunder. Cassius Clay had discovered his true power. Fame could be more than personal glory. It could be the microphone that amplified the pain, anger, and hope of an entire people. He wasn't just a sports champion. He was the beginning of a champion of forgotten voices. And this boy, who once threw his medal into the river, now stood tall with the silent promise to fight for something much bigger than himself. And that's where Muhammad Ali's true fight begins. A fight without gloves, without referees, but with far more impact than any knockout. The 1960s were a time of conflict. While television showed American soldiers traversing jungles in Vietnam, millions of citizens marched in the streets within the United States, demanding civil rights and equality. It was a divided, nervous country, on the verge of explosion. At the center of this scene was Muhammad Ali, already the crowned world heavyweight champion, but even more renowned for his approach to the world outside the ring. Ali didn't hide behind polite answers. When asked about the possibility of serving in the army and fighting in the Vietnam War, his answer came as a bombshell: "I have nothing against the Viet Cong. None of them ever called me a nigger." This simple, direct, and brutally honest sentence made its way through newspapers, radio and television stations across the country. Suddenly, the boxing hero had become a villain in the eyes of a segment of the public. Critics accused him of being a coward, a traitor, and an ungrateful person. But Ali didn't waver. He knew the price of his words, knew he could lose his titles, his career, even his freedom. Still, he maintained a proud posture before the cameras, firmly repeating, "My conscience does not allow me to take up arms to kill innocent people." Ultimately, Ali wasn't just talking about himself. He spoke for thousands of young black men who were disproportionately sent to the trenches of Vietnam, while in their own country they didn't even have the right to sit in any restaurant or vote freely. It was a contradiction he refused to accept. With his fiery charisma, he exposed before the world the hypocrisy of a nation that demanded sacrifice from those it denied dignity. The decision had swift consequences. In 1967, the American government revoked his boxing license and stripped him of his world championship title. Ali went from sports icon to criminal in the eyes of the law, facing a 5-year prison sentence. Suddenly, the man who seemed invincible was out of the ring, unable to fight, unable to earn money, surrounded by enemies who desired his silence. Even so, Ali didn't back down. He continued to give fiery interviews, participate in debates, and travel the country, speaking at universities, churches, and packed squares. His charisma kept the flame of his cause alive. Young students were inspired by his courage. Civil rights activists saw him as an ally who transformed sports into a stage of resistance. And while many expected to see him broken, Ali became even greater. In one of these speeches, facing a hostile audience, he declared, "If I lose everything by remaining true to my beliefs, I will still be free. I would rather be true to myself than win applause by being false." This phrase echoed like a manifesto, cementing him not only as a boxer but as a warrior in a moral struggle. Ali paid dearly for his refusal, but that price transformed him into a symbol. His resistance showed the world that there were battles more important than any belt, deeper than any knockout. His fight was now political, social, and spiritual, and even away from the ring, he continued to strike with sharp words, striking directly at the hearts of millions. Before moving on to the next chapter, it's important to remember that stories like Ali's deserve to be shared. If you believe his courage deserves to be remembered, like, subscribe to the channel, and comment on what inspires you most about this historical giant. This way, this message will continue to reach more and more people. And to help us continue, buy our ebook from the first link in the description. Besides motivating us, this helps us improve the quality of our content. And in the next chapter, we'll see how Ali's forced fall didn't destroy him, but instead prepared him for one of the most epic comebacks in the history of sports and the fight for justice. Because, for him, each defeat was just the beginning of a new victory. At 25, Muhammad Ali was a champion without a ring. The whole world knew of his talent, but his gloves were shelved, held back by the weight of politics and persecution. Between 1967 and 1971, the fastest and most charismatic man in boxing was kept out of the big arenas, living a kind of exile in his own country. For many athletes, this would have been the end, the slow death of a brilliant career. But Ali was made of a rare material. He transformed silence into noise, absence into presence. During these years, unable to fight, Ali traveled the United States like a modern-day preacher. He went from campus to campus, speaking to young people who were often torn between obeying the government or protesting the war. He took the stage, without a fancy microphone, without shiny gloves, just with his voice. And that voice, firm, mocking, and yet deep, became a spark capable of igniting crowds. "You want me to go into the jungles of Vietnam to kill men who have never wronged me, while the real enemy is here, dressed in a suit and denying me my rights." The audience erupted in applause. These speeches revealed a new side of Ali, not just the champion, but the educator, the agitator, the symbol of resistance. While the authorities tried to erase him, he grew as a political and cultural figure. He became a beacon for young black men who saw in him courage, and for white students who also questioned the legitimacy of the war. The boxer who danced in the ring now danced with words, deflecting attacks from hostile journalists and counterattacking with sharp phrases that became headlines. But behind the wide smile and the provocations, there was pain. Ollie had to support his family without the million-dollar purses from his fights. He sold lectures, accepted small invitations, and survived with dignity. But feeling the pressure of time, his muscles were still strong, but his body screamed for competition. The clock was ticking, and each year away from the ring felt like a punch to the gut of his dreams. They took away the best years of my career, he would say, staring into space, aware of what he was losing. Even so, his faith kept him steadfast. A convert to Islam and close to the Nation of Islam, Ollie saw a spiritual purpose in his fighting. For him, it wasn't just about boxing or politics, but about proving that a man can be true to himself before the entire world. If I die today, I die with a clear conscience. But if I betray my faith, I die every day. This phrase, spoken in an interview, silenced his critics and fueled the admiration of millions. Finally, in 1971, after years of legal battles, the United States Supreme Court overturned his conviction. Ollie was free to return to the ring. The news spread like wildfire. Millions eagerly awaited the return of the silenced champion. And he knew it wouldn't be just another fight. It would be his chance to prove that time hadn't defeated his power, and that his voice, far from being silenced, now echoed louder than ever. On the horizon, a legendary opponent awaited him, Joe Frazier, the new champion, tough, relentless, ready to defend his crown. The world would watch two titans collide, not just for a belt, but for opposing symbols of a divided America. Ollie was back, and his return promised to be more than just a fight. It would be a historic event. But what no one imagined was that this fight, dubbed the fight of the century, would be not just a clash of styles, but a clash of ideologies, egos, and destinies. And, in the end, it would leave scars that would forever mark Muhammad Ali's career. Madison Square Garden was buzzing. It was March 8, 1971, and New York vibrated as if about to witness something greater than a simple sporting event. The ring, illuminated by incandescent spotlights, seemed like the center of the planet. On one side stood Joe Frazier, the undefeated champion, tough, compact, known for his deadly left hook. On the other, Muhammad Ali, returning after 3 years of forced exile, carrying on his shoulders not only the weight of expectation but also the burden of having become a political symbol. The world didn't see two boxers. The world saw two opposing forces colliding in the ring. Ali entered with the same charismatic swagger as ever, strutting as if the arena were his. His body still looked sharp, his eyes sparkled. He smiled for the cameras, taunted Frazier, and shouted quick phrases. "He's never fought anyone like me. He's going down." The audience was divided between boos and applause. A perfect reflection of America at that time, polarized, passionate, ready for confrontation. From the first bell it was clear this wasn't going to be just a fight. Ali started dancing, light on his feet, throwing precise jabs, trying to show that time on the sidelines hadn't made him rusty. Frazier, patient, advanced like a bull, absorbing blows and waiting for the right moment. With each round, Madison Square Garden roared. Radio stations broadcast every punch as if it were gunfire in a war, and millions watched live on TV. In the 8th round, Ali landed brilliant combinations, his unique style shining through again. He smiled in the ring, mocked, raised his arms, as if to say, "I'm still the greatest." But Frazier didn't back down. He advanced with almost animalistic force, striking Ali's body, draining his stamina. The champion lacked the flash of trash talk, but he did possess silence and discipline. While Ali talked, Frazier struck. The climax came in the 15th round. Exhausted, the two boxers were no longer just athletes, they were bloodied warriors. And then came the blow that marked the night. Frazier landed a perfect left hook, straight to Ali's chin. The giant fell, staggered, but got back up before the count ended. The image traveled the world. The invincible Muhammad Ali knocked down for the first time. He finished the fight standing, but not as the victor. Frazier won by unanimous decision, crowned the hero of the night. For the public, the fight was more than sport. It was theater, it was politics, it was a metaphor for America itself. It represented rebellion, protests, the youth rising up against the war. Frazier, on the other hand, was seen as order, the silent worker, the champion of the system. The result divided opinions, but no one doubted it. It had been the most intense fight ever seen. Even defeated Ali didn't emerge any weaker. His fall in the ring only increased his legendary aura. "They can knock me down, but they'll never silence me," he said, still panting after the fight. The phrase made headlines, resonating like a creed. He had lost the fight, but he had gained something more valuable, the respect even of those who hated him. The world saw Ollie not just as a boxer, but as a man who saw defeats as steps toward a greater victory. And this defeat planted the seed for an even greater comeback. Because, for Muhammad Ali, every fall was a rehearsal for the glory that would come later. The public didn't know it, but that fight was just the first act of a legendary trilogy that would forever mark the history of the sport. In the next chapter we'll see how Ollie turned pain into redemption, rebuilding his career with battles that bordered on the impossible and, till the moment he proved in front of everyone why he deserved to be called the greatest. After his loss to Joe Frazier, many believed Muhammad Ali had lost his luster, but history isn't written in a single night. He returned to the ring countless times, facing tough opponents, winning some, losing others, but always keeping the flame burning. Each fight was more than boxing, it was a chapter of endurance, a metaphor for his own life. Ali knew he couldn't just fight for titles, he had to fight for meaning. 2 years later he would face Frazier again, and this time he won, regaining not only his trust but also the respect of the sports world. But the pinnacle of his redemption would come in 1974, in Kinshasa, Zaire, against George Foreman, the undefeated and feared champion, considered virtually unassailable. The fight became known as the Rumble in the Jungle. He entered as an underdog. No one believed he could win, but he had a plan. Instead of attacking relentlessly, Ali leaned against the ropes and began absorbing Foreman's vicious blows. The crowd of 60,000 chanted Ali, kill him. Each punch sounded like thunder, but Ali smiled, taunted, and delivered phrases that unnerved the giant. And then, in the 8th round, when Foreman was already exhausted, Ali delivered a perfect combination. The unbeaten champion fell. The world fell silent for a second before erupting in euphoria. Ollie had done the impossible. This victory wasn't just sporting, it was symbolic. It showed that intelligence, patience, and courage could overcome even the most brutal force. Ollie had reinvented his career, proving that he was not just a fighter but a strategist, a master who knew how to turn weakness into a weapon. But his redemption wasn't limited to boxing. Outside the ring, he continued to be an active voice against racism, war, and human dignity. In interviews, he recalled that titles passed, but the fight for justice remained. He visited hospitals, spoke to poor children, and inspired generations to believe that a man could be greater than the circumstances that surrounded him. As the years passed, his body began to show signs of wear and tear. The battles in the ring left deep scars. Parkinson's disease would emerge as a silent adversary, robbing him of the speed of his speech and the firmness of his movements. But even so, Ollie never lost his essence. When he lit the Olympic torch in Atlanta in 1996, trembling before the world, he displayed a courage no belt could symbolize. Ali ended his life as he began, defying limits. He was more than a world champion. He was a symbol of resilience, faith, and humanity. He used his fame not only to glorify himself, but to amplify voices no one wanted to hear. He transformed his career into a platform for justice, and his charisma into a banner of freedom. His greatest fight was never against Frazier, Foreman, or Liston. His greatest fight was against injustice, silence, and fear. And in that battle, Muhammad Ali was never defeated, because, in the end, being the greatest didn't just mean winning fights. It meant using every victory and every fall as a weapon to change the world. And that legacy no one will ever be able to erase. Muhammad Ali was never just a fighter. His entire life was an act of rebellion, courage, and humanity. Inside the ring, he enchanted the world with his speed, unique style, and unparalleled charisma. Outside of it, he faced even tougher battles against racism, against war, against a system that tried to silence him. Every punch he threw, every sentence he uttered, carried the strength of millions who had no voice. He showed that fame could be much more than the spotlight. It could be a trench, a megaphone, a tool for transformation. When he refused to fight in Vietnam, he lost titles, lost money, and lost the best years of his career. But he gained something no belt could offer: moral immortality. Ollie proved that courage isn't about not feeling afraid, but facing fear head-on. His legacy isn't just in the classic fights against Frazier, Foreman, or Liston. It's in the eyes of black children who grew up seeing him as a mirror of pride. It's in the young people who learned that being true to oneself is worth more than any applause. It's in every person who understood, through him, that true greatness lies in serving causes greater than one's own ego. When illness tried to drown out his voice, the world realized it no longer needed to listen to his words. It was enough to remember his actions. Even trembling before the Olympic torch in Atlanta, he proved that the body may fail, but the spirit of a just man never dies. Muhammad Ali taught us that life is a continuous struggle, but that each person can choose who and what to fight for. He fought for dignity, for equality, for justice. And in this fight, he was never defeated. The ring went dark, the applause died down, but the echo of his voice lingers. Ali wasn't just the greatest in boxing. He was, and always will be, the greatest example that true victory lies in changing the world, one round at a time.